Welcome to another episode of the Unitrans podcast. Today, we want to discuss cross-border logistics and the realities behind moving goods seamlessly across African borders. While regional trade is often discussed in high-level terms, the real work happens on the ground at borders, corridors, and custom points. Joining us in the discussion is Customs Manager Hugo Nieuwenhuizen and Juanita Maree, who is the CEO of the South African Association of Freight Forwarding, better known as SAAFF. Please share a bit about yourselves with me and your experience across cross-border operations. We look forward to discussing collaboration, compliance, and practical problem-solving as foundations for more consistent and reliable cross-border operations. So welcome.
Okay, my name is Hugo Nieuwenhuizen. I'm a customs manager for Unitrans. I started my career at Customs in 1983. I worked for SAAFF Customs for 12 years. And then I joined the freight forwarding company. I think I started at micro shipping. And then after that, I just progressed through the freight forwarding industry. As a customs manager, I worked myself up because that's what I love. That's what I did for the 12 years. And I'm still in it.
Thank you. My career started after university. Well, I was doing my cost and management accounting, and then I did my honors degree in cost and management accounting. Then I started working for an import company that was doing in those years control valves. And I do have a very nice, I would think maybe my mom and dad didn't know that, but the engineering side, and I enjoy the control valves quite a lot. And then the owner decided after probably 10 years that he's going to give you the company up. But in that time, I was actually working quite a lot with Finland because we were doing the control valves from Finland. And that's probably where my love started for the supply chain and how you stitch the supply chain together. And then in 2011, I decided, well, I'm going to embark on a PhD. And my PhD was specifically on risk management, and believe it or not, in customs environment, and how you need to do a scientific risk profiling to detect the high and the low and the medium risk. And then, I finished received my PhD in COVID. And in 2021, I started as CEO myself. So that's currently my journey. And I must say, I'm probably a supply chain activist.
Okay, I love that. Now, if we look at cross-border trade, we know it's central to regional connectivity. What are the biggest practical challenges operators face when moving goods across borders today?
There's different factors that's hampering cross-border movement. You can start with the producer itself. They need to be registered with customs to be an exporter. The transporters as well, they also need to be registered with customs as transporters of goods or transporters of goods in bond. And then, you also need to use clearing agents to actually do the paperwork for you. But there's various other factors as well that hampers cross-border movement, like different government institutions. You get customs, you've got to register with them. You've got Port Health, you've got State Vet, you've got ITAC for import-export permits. Then you've got DAF, if it's livestock or meat or produce that you need to move across the borders. There's a whole lot of factors that just got an influence on the cross-border movement of cargo. And then you look at the border post itself. So they need to be geared up for that. And if they're not, then there's a delay in the movement of the cargo.
Okay.
You get your logistics layer, which we can say is the bottom, and then you get a transaction layer that sits on top of the logistics layer. And then you get the entity layer, who's involved in the supply chain. And then the government are looking through a see-through glass to see, do they comply with the different regulations. And when you look at cross-border, is that it all goes about risk management. So it goes about the compliance. Do you pay the right taxes? Do you export goods that's safe and secure for the citizens? And I think what we found in Africa is that all those policies are not coherent, and each country have its sovereign authority, and that's why they don't let the supply chain to flow. So it's very difficult for the operators in the supply chain to handle all these obstacles because it is not a cohesive landscape. But hopefully with the geopolitical environment that's changing, we will get a focus into Africa to make sure that how can we remove the waste and the friction, because you can think for yourself, if the logistics layer, as Hugo was saying, have the transaction layer and then you've got the entity and it's not talking at the same time to each other in the same language, you've got a lot of friction and waste in the supply chain.
Okay, so that's where the challenges come in, because we know that border delays, document requirements, and process variability are common challenges. But where do these issues most often arise in practice?
Well, if you look at the documentation part of it, it normally starts with the exporter. He's got to do the proper invoicing that conforms to the standards that customs have set, and the packing list. Because on grounds of that documentation, you need to do your customs SAD 500, your export document or your import. And also, there's also, depends on what countries it's going to up in Africa, which are part of SADC or part of SACU. There's SADC certificates that's also required for that. And it all depends where that documentation is done and how it's done and how many errors are on there. That will also have a role to play in the delays of cargo cross-border.
Yeah, maybe if I can complement, and just an example, the N4 corridor is very close to us because we export to Mozambique, so that's very much an export country. So if you look now for South Africa, we have the mums and the pops that do the consumer goods, but mainly it's a middle export corridor. So we want the export to move as quick as possible. So we didn't perceive any risk, so we just wanted to move. But Mozambique probably don't have the same because they are not sure that we're just using it to arrive at their borders to be loaded. And also what the problem comes in with cross-border is that normally it needs to adhere to a schedule. It's either an ocean ship vessel, it's a production schedule. So for us, and many people will ask us, why are we rather going to other parts of the world than instead of South Africa? Because we can supply and we are the gateway, but it becomes much more problematic to go through all the border posts. Instead, you just have your ocean modality that would come into Dar es Salaam or Walvis Bay or Maputo, and then we lose out. So I think it's something that we as South Africa, let's say from our association point of view, want to make sure that there's a fluid ratio and we remove this waste. And as Hugo was saying, is people can just make a mistake in the documentation and then your truck is standing in the queue.
So things can really get quite interesting very quickly, very complex very quickly.
And then they stop. If you look at again now back to the N4 corridor, we move 1,800 vehicles on that corridor.
Wow.
So if you have one trader or somebody in the queue that don't adhere to the protocols, you have a challenge.
That's
because
true.
it holds up then the queue.
You see, when you go for the cross-border on the vehicle, obviously you need to do a road manifest. On the road manifest is the truck and the trailer's details, the driver's passport number. If any of those digits are incorrect, customs won't let it go through. You have to do a voucher of correction and the truck stands. Because the truck stands, the queue can't move. So that's where the delays at the border post also come in.
But we see now things are changing. There's now more digitization that's happening. We know that digital tools and streamlined processes are now becoming part of the cross-border operations. At a practical level though, where do you see technology helping to reduce those delays, to improve predictability without needing a major overhaul at the same time?
I would think if you look at the supply chain, it's very demand supply. So the demand is the people want to use that corridor. Then the supply is that what do we have? We have customs, we have got other government agencies, we've got 17 of them. They need to make sure that the cargo complies, there's no risk. Then you've got number plate recognition. So the demand and supply must be like a handshake. The moment you've got more demand, trucks that's going through the corridor, and you have limited resources to look at the risk, they can't process, maybe the number plate recognition is not working, you create a bottleneck. And then that is like when you create a bottleneck, it's just then pushing all the cargo back. That's why you have this massive queues that's then starting. And then if you don't have a quick enough escalation or protocol, you can have humanitarian problems because the driver is sitting too long in the truck. There's nobody to look after him. So that's where we believe your digitalization can help us quite a lot. Because when there's digitalization, you know how many trucks is on its way to the border. You can capacitate the border enough to handle the flow, and then you can go through. But I think it's that coordination of AI will give it to us, but now we need to make sure that we have an escalation and a communication protocol, that we can quickly make sure that the border post can work effectively. And I think that is where the biggest challenge will come, that we synchronize all those different activities along the way.
Customs has checked up the system because what they've done is you've got a pre-clear at the border post. Okay. And by pre-clearing the shipments, that information will also go across the border to the other customs agents. So if you pre-clear it, they give you a removal to notification to the border, proceed to border. The moment that you give that notification, then only can the truck move to the border. There are some of the transporters that don't do that. They don't use inland agents, they use border agents. So by the time the truck arrives there, it will stand until the paperwork is done. And while the truck is standing, it's holding up the rest of the queue.
So relationships obviously make a huge difference in this kind of scenario. But how important are those relationships when it comes to collaboration between operators, authorities, and partners to smoothen out that process? How important would you say the relationship is?
I think it's critical because it's not, for an example, if we export out of Durban, you take your cargo to the stack, you hand it over to Transnet load it on the vessel, it's departure. The moment when you look at the land border, it's a Jacopo's model. It's that South Africa, private sector is there, they work with SAAFF, they work with other government agencies, and then they work with their counterpartners, which is then in Mozambique, which is customs and other government agencies, and then you've got the private sector. So I would think maybe in the world, the most collaboration model is a cross-border movement, because you need to get everyone in the room to understand. And you will see now in South Africa, it's very much the drive that our export clearance becomes Mozambique import clearance. Okay. Because then you know the documentation is not tampered with. But the next step is now our customs export documentation digitalized must be transport to Mozambique digitalized, and it must be real time. And they are busy, the World Bank is involved to build that, because if we in Africa get it right, I can tell you the sky's the limit, because then we can start moving cargo, you have a quick turnaround time, you don't have waste friction, it would be a pleasure. But unfortunately, and we don't say that, but the criminals also know, they like stops. So that is the reality in our world.
Yeah, see, the other problem there also is that South Africa uses one system, and most of Africa uses a Asikuda system. So there is a interface between the SARS system and Asikuda. That's why, as you are saying, is the moment I press the button on this side, the partners on the other side will also receive the same information.
So we see that coordination is quite important in this situation. So when it comes to now cross-border logistics, what practices would you say help maintain that alignment when it comes to several countries or agencies that are involved?
Yeah, South Africa belongs to the World Customs Organization, so it's about 189 countries in the world. And they talk about it, a World Customs Organization data model. So they prescribe what is all the data models, what must be in a supplier's invoice, what must be in a customs declaration. And that data model, if all the countries subscribe to the data model, then they can do data exchange. And they do have it in the WCO as well. They call it a customs to customs pillar, where they can share information. And then they have a customs to business and a customs to other government agencies. So South Africa is quite in the forefront with that, but for that to work, all the countries must be on the same level, and I think that's going to take some time. If you look at the European Union, they are all on the same level, and they do that interfaces seamlessly. But I think in Africa, it's going to take some time. Well, if you look at the East African community, they have already a lot of data sharing between them Tanzania and Burundi and which they share information. But I think once we catch it up in the southern region of Africa, it's going to go quite quick because there's nothing really that could stop us to interface quick.
You see, the World Customs Organization also started the AEO program, Approved Economic Operator. So that is not just country-based, it's world-based. And if you enjoy that accreditation, then you align with other companies overseas and up in South Africa, which has got the same accreditation. So you actually become an extension to the customs authority.
Okay.
Because that's all handles around compliance.
Yeah, because it was coming from Sweden where they said there's too many transactions for the customs to control. It's impossible. So then they decided to have a trusted trader program. I trust you, and because I trust you, I'll give you some benefits. So I think it's what I explained earlier, the logistics layer transaction, that entity layer. They want to put into that entity layer an element of trust. And if I trust you, and you can see our Professor Kitzwetter is very much on that. You're a trusted trader, and you pay your taxes, and you comply. And because you do that, I'm going to give you some benefits. So, and it seems that ethos in the logistics environment will bring us a lot of credibility and to help us to move the cargo quite quick.
Now, on the people side of things, what role do people play on the ground when it comes to resolving issues quickly and keeping supply chains moving, despite all this complexity that you're discussing with us now?
You know, there's pros and cons to that. like everywhere.
Yeah.
People on the ground in the moment at the border posts, you know, they supposed to act as problem solvers. But, you know, they're not really doing a very good job of it. If you have a shipment that's detained, obviously it needs to be inspected by people. If they do find a little problem onto it, then they will push you one side and they will carry on trying to get the rest of the trucks that don't have a problem sorted out. But your problem still stands there, and this is what Juanita earlier said, is that then the humanitarian portion comes into it. Because that truck driver sits in his truck, he can't move out because it's in the customs control area. And, you know, at the heat is 38 degrees and he's got to sit in his truck. The truck's got to run all the time to run the aircon. So there's another fiscal issue to the owner of the truck because there's diesel that's been used. On the other hand, you get some of the customs officers that's quite jacked up. They will try and get the trucks out as fast as possible. They will then also adjust whatever they are doing to facilitate the truck moving through. Okay. So there's pros and cons for people at the border post.
And if you look at the evolution of now cross-border operations, what practices would you say improve predictability and reliability over time?
I would think planning and transparency.
Okay.
Because if we get it right that we know what is the demand, how many trucks will move to the border post, and there's the transparency, and the people at the border post, although a lot of countries don't want the border post to be a stop, they want to push the controls much more earlier in the supply chain to maybe say that you must inspect your cargo inland, we will do a seal, we will close it off, we will do seal recognition. So the border post will actually then get away. I'm not sure if we will get in my lifetime to that scenario. But that means if you have planning and transparency, and you've got a good escalation mechanism, that if there's something happening at the border post and you know who to phone, which authority to quickly unlock it, I think we're on a long way to having a winning formula, because that's normally what the problem is with the border post. You can see this build-up is going to create a catastrophe, but you can see it in private sector, but then you want the public sector to wake up to see that here's a catastrophe coming. But they see the catastrophe too late, and the moment that they experience it too late, we all know it. It's difficult then to claw back. And all what we want to know in private sector, we can plan and transparency. And if you see this catastrophe happening, quickly unlock it and plan and take hands. So I would think that's what I would suggest that transparency go with it.
The government agents, especially SAAFF, is also looking at smart borders or one-stop border posts, where the information that they push through on the risk engine, when you submit a document to them, and then all that information goes through to the border posts. That's all contained in your road manifest.
Okay.
So when a truck gets to the border and there's a barcode on there, the moment he scans it in, all the information that was on the SAAFF's risk engine is on that piece of paper.
Okay.
And then that will tell them the truck needs to be stopped. This is the problem with this truck. There's some details that's missing, or the truck is ready for clearance and it can go through. All that information is contained in that barcode, which also helps a lot for the cross-border assistance for the vehicles that pass through.
That is very interesting. But now tell us, as a final thought, what does the future of cross-border transaction look like for you guys? What do you think is going to happen in the future if you were to cast your eye into the next 10, 15 years or so?
You know, Hugo said barcode. You know, the guy, it was two gentlemen that developed the barcode. It was in 1952.
Wow.
But they never designed the barcode to do what it's doing today. And I think that's probably what AI will do. We see it now, but it will transform our environment, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years tremendously.
Yeah, I think AI is going to play a big role. On the moment as well, Customs is also implementing AI in the system. Because if we do a clearance and there's a query on the documentation, it can be queried for a million things. But the documentation that you submit has to be in certain formats. Because Customs made a change to the format of packing lists, invoices, how the documentation must be, and so on. So what they do is I'll upload it and I send it to Customs. That documentation goes through an AI process where they scan the documents. And what information that I've scanned in must relate to the information that they got from overseas. And if it doesn't match, obviously entry gets rejected. Or they ask for more information. So AI is going to play a big role in future.
Artificial intelligence is incredible how in every sector we discuss, it plays such a critical role. We can't thank you enough for the amazing insights that you've shared with us. Through this discussion, we've learned that seamless trade is built through cooperation, consistency, and people working together across borders. Thank you, Hugo and Juanita. We really appreciate you for unpacking the realities behind cross-border logistics. You've helped us see that cross-border effectiveness depends not only on agreements, but on execution. On our next episode, we will discuss how logistics supports trade, continuity, and connection across the continent.